The Billionaire's Unexpected Return. Alexander Grant was not the kind of man who liked surprises. He was the one who gave them. A billionaire known for his sharp mind and even sharper business deals, he controlled entire companies with a single phone call. But tonight, life had decided to surprise him instead. His trip to London had ended 2 days earlier than expected. The deal was done, the contract signed. Most men in his position would have called home, told the staff to prepare dinner, and waited for a grand welcome. But Alexander didn't want a grand welcome. He wanted to see his home the way it truly was when no one knew he was watching. It was past 11 when his car rolled up the long driveway. The giant iron gates opened silently, and the mansion came into view, tall, proud, and glowing faintly under the moonlight. No guards at the door, no lights in the main hall. Perfect. The chauffeur asked if he should alert the house staff. Alexander shook his head. "No, I'll walk in myself," he said quietly. The front door opened with a familiar creak. The smell of polished wood and fresh flowers greeted him, but the air felt still. Almost too still. Usually, even at night, the mansion had life. Footsteps in the hall, faint music from the kitchen, the soft hum of conversation from the staff quarters. Tonight, there was nothing. Alexander moved through the dimly lit hallway, his leather shoes making no sound on the carpet. He passed the grand staircase, the family portraits staring down at him like silent witnesses. His eyes lingered for a moment on the newest painting, himself and his daughter Sophie, taken at a charity gala. She had been smiling then. He wondered when he had last seen her smile like that. He took a few more steps, and then he froze. A sound, faint, almost hidden under the quiet of the house. Laughter. Not the loud, carefree laughter of a child, playing, but something softer, gentle. It came from upstairs. His heart tightened. Sophie should have been asleep hours ago. Who was with her? He climbed the staircase slowly, careful not to make the steps creak. At the top, the hallway stretched into shadows, the warm yellow light from Sophie's room spilling faintly onto the carpet. The door was not fully closed. Alexander approached, every step sharper in his mind than the last. As he got closer, the laughter became clearer, mixed with words, whispered and low. He stopped just before the doorway. Through the small gap he saw them. Sophie sat on her bed, her hair messy, her face pale under the lamplight. She wasn't wearing her usual cheerful pajamas, but an old, oversized sweater. In her hands was a small blue diary. Sitting beside her was Amara, the young black maid he had hired only 2 months ago. Amara was leaning close, one hand on Sophie's shoulder, the other gently turning the diary's pages. Her voice was calm, almost like she was telling a bedtime story. Sophie's eyes glistened as she listened. Alexander's mind spun. What was this? Why was Amara in Sophie's room so late at night? And why was his daughter holding that diary so tightly, as if it were a lifeline? Then he noticed something else. Sophie was trembling. It wasn't from fear, at least not the kind he could see. It was something deeper. Amara's thumb brushed away a tear from Sophie's cheek, and Alexander felt an unexpected twist in his chest. He should walk in. He should demand answers. This was his house, his daughter. But something made him stay where he was, hidden in the shadows. Sophie whispered something. Amara's face changed. Whatever Sophie had said, it was not something a child should have to say. Amara's eyes widened, and her lips pressed into a thin, firm line. She reached forward and took Sophie's hands in her own, speaking softly, but with a strength Alexander had never heard in her voice before. Alexander strained to catch the words. "You're safe now," Amara said. Safe? From what? Alexander's heartbeat quickened. He gripped the doorframe without realizing it. The urge to barge in was almost unbearable, but a strange fear held him back. A fear of what he might hear if he asked the wrong question. The clock on Sophie's bedside table ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Sophie leaned against Amara, her small body shaking as she whispered again. This time, Amara's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, like someone agreeing to carry a heavy secret. Alexander's throat tightened. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary late-night talk. Something was wrong, very wrong, and tomorrow the quiet walls of this mansion would not be able to hide it anymore. The mysterious scene. Alexander stayed at the doorway, his shadow hidden in the darkness of the hallway. Every instinct told him to step inside, but something in the room, something fragile, held him back. Sophie's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but he could hear the tremble in it. She held the little blue diary close to her chest, like she was afraid someone might take it away. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her posture calm but her eyes sharp, as if every word Sophie said mattered more than anything else in the world. Alexander had hired Amara after a quick interview. She was polite, spoke little, and had strong references from a family in the city. She was supposed to clean the house, help with meals, and keep out of trouble. She wasn't supposed to be here, late at night, looking at his daughter like she was protecting her from the entire world. "What happened today?" Amara asked softly, her voice low but steady. Sophie's lips moved, and Alexander leaned in slightly, trying to hear. He caught only fragments. "School, mean, don't tell," and his jaw tightened. Amara reached for Sophie's hand, holding it with both of hers. "You can tell me anything. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you," she said, her voice firm now, almost like a promise. Alexander felt a strange twist inside him. Not anger, not yet, but something that made him uneasy. What could be so bad that Sophie hadn't told him? Sophie hesitated, then slowly opened the diary. Alexander could see the pages from where he stood, tiny handwriting, shaky letters, smudged ink where tears had fallen. "Read it," Sophie whispered. Amara's eyes scanned the page, and her expression changed instantly. Her shoulders stiffened. Her lips pressed together so tightly that the color drained from them. Whatever she was reading, it was something she did not want Sophie to keep inside. Alexander's fingers gripped the doorframe harder. He had faced ruthless businessmen, corrupt politicians, and high-stakes deals worth millions, but he had never felt the kind of cold unease that was building in his chest right now. When Amara looked up again, her voice was low, almost dangerous. This isn't right," she said. "Sophie, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Sophie's eyes welled with fresh tears. "Because if Daddy finds out, he'll be mad," she said in a trembling voice. The words cut deep. Alexander stepped forward without thinking, his shoes making a faint sound on the carpet. Amara and Sophie turned toward him instantly. The room froze. Sophie looked small under the lamplight, her hands clutching the diary tightly. Amara sat still, but her eyes locked on him with a mix of caution and quiet strength, as if deciding whether she could trust him with what she knew. Alexander's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "What's going on here?" Neither of them spoke at first. The silence between them was so heavy it felt like the air had stopped moving. Finally, Amara straightened her back. "Mr. Grant, I think you should sit down," she said. Alexander's brow, chest furrowed. "Why?" Her answer was simple, but carried a weight he could feel in his bones. "Because once you hear this, you can't pretend you didn't know. The hidden pain." Alexander stepped into the room, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the carpet. Sophie's grip on the diary tightened, her knuckles turning white. "Tell me," Alexander said, his voice calm but heavy. Amara looked at Sophie, waiting for her permission. Sophie gave the faintest nod. Amara took a slow breath. "Sir, your daughter has been carrying something alone. Something no child should have to hide." Alexander's stomach turned. "What is it?" But Amara didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the diary. Sophie hesitated, then let it go. The small book looked fragile in Amara's hands, yet it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She opened it to a page filled with uneven handwriting. The ink had bled in places, as though tears had fallen there. Amara didn't read it aloud. She only held it for him to see. Alexander leaned closer. His eyes scanned the first few lines. His chest tightened. They laugh at me every day. They push me in the hall. They say my dad doesn't love me. I believe them sometimes. Alexander's heart pounded. He forced himself to keep reading. I try to be strong, but it's hard when I'm alone. He closed the diary slowly, his jaw tightening. Why didn't you tell me, Sophie? He asked, his voice softer now. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Because you're always busy, and I didn't want you to be angry. The words cut deeper than any business betrayal he had ever faced. For years, he had built an empire to give his daughter the best life possible, but somewhere along the way, she had started to believe she couldn't come to him for help. Alexander turned to Amara. And you knew? Amara met his gaze without flinching. I found out 2 weeks ago. She fainted in the kitchen. When I helped her, she begged me not to tell you. I wanted to, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She needed someone to listen first, someone who wouldn't turn her pain into a storm. Alexander said nothing. His hand rested on the back of a chair, his fingers tense. He didn't like the idea of being kept in the dark, but looking at Sophie now, small, pale, and trembling, he realized this wasn't about his pride. It was about his daughter's trust. Amara's voice softened. Sir, Sophie doesn't need anger right now. She needs to feel safe. Let her tell you in her own way. The room fell silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. Alexander sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving Sophie's face. All right, he said quietly. I'm listening. Sophie wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she began to speak. And as the first words left her lips, Alexander knew whatever she was about to say would change everything. The truth revealed. Sophie's eyes dropped to the floor. Her small hands twisted the edge of her sweater as if she could hide inside it. It started months ago, she said softly. At school. Alexander leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Go on. They make fun of me, Sophie continued, her voice breaking. They call me names. They say I'm spoiled. They push me in the hallway. They laugh when I cry. Alexander's fist tightened. Who? Sophie shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. It doesn't matter. They'll just do worse if I tell. Amara's hand rested gently on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie, you're not alone anymore. Sophie hesitated, then pulled her sleeve up. A faint bruise was visible on her arm. Alexander's breath caught. They did this? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Sophie nodded. And more. They say you don't really care about me, that you're too busy making money to notice me, and sometimes I believe them. The words hit Alexander harder than any boardroom loss. He felt as if the air had been knocked out of him. All his business victories, all the money in his accounts, none of it mattered if his daughter believed she was unloved. Amara spoke then, her voice steady but filled with quiet strength. Mr. Grant, I've been talking to her every night, teaching her how to stand tall, how to speak without shaking. I didn't tell you right away because she needed someone to trust, someone who wouldn't explode in anger. She's been healing, little by little. Alexander turned to Sophie, his voice softer now. Why didn't you tell me yourself? Because you always look so busy, Sophie whispered, like there's no space for me in your world. Those words shattered something inside him. He realized in that moment that while he had been building an empire for her future, he had been losing her in the present. He reached out slowly. Sophie, I'm sorry. I should have seen it. I should have been here. Sophie's eyes welled with tears again, but this time, she didn't pull away when he took her hand. The silence in the room was no longer heavy with fear. It was heavy with a truth that could not be ignored. And Alexander knew nothing in his life would be the same after tonight. The emotional shift. Alexander sat there, holding his daughter's small hand in his own. For years, he had faced the toughest negotiations, the most ruthless competitors. But nothing had prepared him for this. Looking into Sophie's eyes and seeing both pain and hope. The guilt pressed heavy on his chest. How many times had he walked past her room without knocking? How many dinners had he missed because of urgent calls? He had told himself it was for her future. But now, what future was worth it if she felt alone in the present? "I failed you," Alexander said quietly. "Not as a businessman, but as a father." Sophie's lip trembled. "You didn't fail. You just weren't here." Amara, who had been silent, spoke up. "Sir, I've seen children with everything money can buy, but they still cry themselves to sleep. Sophie doesn't need more gifts or clothes. She needs her father." The words were gentle but hit deep. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her. This young woman, someone he had barely spoken to since hiring, had stepped into the role he should have been filling. Sophie squeezed his hand. "I like talking to Amara. She listens, like she really hears me." That simple statement made Alexander's throat tighten. "Then I'll listen too," he said firmly. "From now on." For the first time in months, Sophie's lips curled into a small smile. It wasn't a full one yet, but it was real. Alexander turned to Amara. "Thank you for being here when I wasn't, for protecting her, even from me." Amara shook her head. "I didn't protect her from you, sir. I was protecting her from the silence between you." Those words stayed with him. Alexander made a silent vow. This house would no longer be filled with quiet emptiness. No more missed dinners. No more unopened doors. The night was late, but Alexander didn't want to leave Sophie's side. They talked about her school, her friends, even her favorite books. Every answer was a window into the world he had been too busy to see. And as the clock ticked past midnight, Alexander knew this was the start of something new, not just for Sophie, but for him. The decision that changes everything. Morning light streamed into the mansion's dining room. The long table was set for breakfast, but today it wasn't just another silent meal with servants moving quietly in the background. Alexander was already seated at the head of the table when Sophie walked in, still in her soft pajamas. Amara followed behind, carrying a tray of fresh fruit. "Come sit," Alexander said warmly, pulling out the chair beside him. Sophie blinked in surprise. "Beside you?" "Yes," he smiled. "That's where you belong." They ate together, not rushing. For the first time in years, Alexander asked about her plans for the day and actually listened to the answers. Sophie talked about the book she liked, the art project she wanted to try, and the little garden she wished she had in the backyard. Halfway through the meal, Alexander cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, looking at both Sophie and Amara. "Things are going to change around here." Sophie tilted her head. "Change how?" "I've already called the school," Alexander said. "We're meeting with the headmaster. The bullying will stop today, and if it doesn't, you won't go back there. We'll find somewhere you can learn without fear." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Alexander said firmly. "And that's not all. I'm rearranging my schedule. No more weeks away without seeing you. No more missed dinners." He glanced at Amara. "And Amara, I'd like you to stay on, not just as a maid, but as Sophie's companion, mentor, whatever she needs." Amara was speechless for a moment. "Sir, I'd be honored." Sophie's smile bloomed fully now. She jumped from her chair and hugged both of them at once. Alexander wrapped his arms around her small frame, feeling the warmth of something he had almost lost without even realizing it. As they held each other, Alexander thought about the night before, the diary, the tears, the truths that had broken the silence between them. This was more than just fixing a problem. This was building a life where his daughter would never doubt his love again. And for the first time in years, Alexander felt like he wasn't just a billionaire in a mansion. He was a father in a home